Hello. Passionate about sustainability, energy, and climate? You're in the right place. Welcome to Energetic. I'm Maureen Cornelis, and together we will engage with people who dedicate their lives to climate justice and making a just energy transition happen. They may be activists, scientists, policymakers, or other enthusiasts, just like you. Let the life stories and insights inspire you to build a better future for people and the planet. Aryanisha Lawes is not only a seasoned advocate for social justice and environmental sustainability. For 15 years, she's been on the front lines, combating issues like energy poverty in London's marginalized communities. Aryanisha has a calling. She wants to help the helpers through spiritual wellness. As a Northern Buddhist, her name, which means she whose dream is of the noble ones, mirrors her commitment to elevating human dignity and her desire to bring systemic changes. In 2022, Aryanisha decided to leave her role with Repowering London to found her own business whose mission is to empower other changemakers, coaching them in leadership, power, and well-being, and enabling them to effectively drive social and environmental reforms. Aryanisha, welcome to Energetic.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Aryanisha. So you have a beautiful name, which signifies she whose dream is of the noble ones. But it carries a lot of weight. So how does this spiritual dimension influence your approach to social justice and environmental sustainability? What came first?
Gosh, yeah, which came first? I mean, I feel like they're so intertwined because my exploration of Buddhism started at the very same time that I kicked off my own career. So I think I ended up on a retreat at a place called Aryanisha in Scotland a few months after I graduated in 2011, if I've got the right decade that we're in now. And yeah, so my whole kind of leap into the world of sustainability and justice and all of that was just sort of shaped by me exploring my own mental states and my own behavior as well. So you can't really separate them out. Like I even had someone ask me on LinkedIn the other day, like, how do I integrate Buddhism into my coaching work? And it's basically completely inseparable. It's just maybe more that the language I use is very secular and very accessible because that's very important to me. But yeah, it's not like there's like Buddhist version of me and this other version of me is sort of completely intertwined. And in terms of, I think, how my name affects me and my work, well, there's different ways that you can look at like the name and what it kind of signifies. And it's definitely like it's definitely an aspirational name. I'm not always she whose dream is of the noble ones. I'm sometimes she who is quite grumpy and reactive with my fiance. So there's this kind of aspirational element in it. And I think first and foremost, it gets me to take responsibility for my own actions, my own ethics, my own mental states, my own ways of communicating with other people. So that really has to come first, that, taking complete radical responsibility for how you show up in the world. And then it kind of radiates out from there. And when I was given the name, because you have this whole kind of like ceremony around it. It's like a whole thing. And I remember the day after, it might even been like a couple of hours after, actually going for a walk. And I was up in some fenlands in Wales near the retreat centre. And I just immediately had this sense of, that dream of the noble ones, that dream of, people who have really liberated themselves from greed, hatred and delusion. That dream can't just stay something in my own mind. It has to become something that's real. It has to get taken out into the world. So maybe there's just this dialogue between that kind of really, really beautiful vision and how to, turn that into reality. So it's not just like some nice kind of fluffy idea really, or it's not just nice sentiment, but it's something that, we're just kind of working towards day to day. And I do think my role as a coach actually is to hold people's potential in mind when they can't for themselves. Like, I think that's really important. We don't always see ourselves clearly, and we can get very focused on the negative things that we want to change. We can relate to ourselves as problems that need to get fixed, and really holding that kind of potential for liberation and compassion and courage and all of that. That's what I think a good mentor and coach will do for you. It's certainly what people have done for me as well. Yeah, there you go. It's a little bit. Still all day about my name. It's meant to be your path. It's your kind of like your path of practice. Everything is contained within the name.
So really about this path that you just mentioned. So you've transitioned from being on the front lines, addressing energy poverty, to coaching change makers, to coaching the people who are on the front lines, addressing energy poverty, addressing vulnerability, trying to overcome or to be the change they want to see in the world. But somehow you also, the focus of your business is also to enable them to be the best version of themselves and to somehow avoid some kind of overload or even burnouts. So what was the catalyst that inspired this significant career shift? I mean, part of it was, I understand that was the name that was given to you, that you had this in you, but was there other elements that led you to change to this journey?
Oh, I love talking about this. It's so interesting when we're trying to weave the narrative of our lives together. Like, I've definitely noticed over the years, like when I talk about why I'm a Buddhist, why I've made certain decisions, like my story about it changes. The sense of what the sort of significant factors changes in itself. So I find the process of reflecting on this interesting anyway. I can make it sound like really like straightforward and sensible, like I've gone through several cycles of burnout myself. My mum and my sister both also have chronic fatigue. They work for a local welfare benefits teams that helping people on the front lines of poverty all the time as well. So it's very like obvious, straightforward things. But I also just got back from my ordination retreat, which was like I had 3 weeks away in Wales for it. I got back and I just had this very, very strong kind of vision one day during a meditation practice of being on a shore, looking out over the ocean and just being surrounded by, well, it was actually just surrounded by women. I think it was just generally people, but it felt very strong like it was women. And just kind of breathing in and out as the sea just kind of flowed in and out. And there's this great sense of expansiveness and, just being part of this kind of like vast crowd of women who were kind of looking for something. And then I spent basically like 2 weeks of doing tarot cards every single morning for myself as a self-coaching tool. So I just ask myself a question like, what do I feel called to do with my life? And then I'll just pull a few tarot cards out, read the blurb, and then see what happens. And this has kind of emerged. So I've got these like two versions of this story. One, which is probably like a bit more woo-woo, which just came out of, this ordination and this vision. And I had a lot of dreams. I mean, part of the reason I have this name is because I have very, very vivid dreams, which are often very symbolic for me. Yeah, and this whole like tarot card process and the sense of just following this calling, which I feel is really important. And then just very pragmatic. I've been in the frontline sector for years. I know how easy it is to get ill if you're not careful. My family are affected. I was teaching people to meditate within South London at my Buddhist community there. And so many people were coming in, having done this kind of work, looking to meditate because they'd heard it would help them be less stressed. And I knew there were more systemic issues that were going on too. So you can have whichever version of the story that you like. Maybe they're both true. Maybe they kind of affect each other.
Yeah, maybe they're really both infringing each other because somehow they, those kind of visions, intuition, you name them, they kind of really help you tap into the potential, something that unconsciously you already wanted. And really one of the things that you aspire for that your business focuses on is coaching in leadership, power, and well-being. I mean, it's a podcast about energy and the people who make the energy transition happen. So I love the fact that you talk about power. I love this synonym in English, the term power as energy, but also power of inner power of the people. But could you elaborate on how these three elements intersect in the work of a change maker, really why they need more leadership, power, well-being. What is the recipe?
I feel like they rub up against each other in a way that's really helpful. I've definitely found that within the kind of meditation and well-being space, there's a risk of falling into kind of niceness. You know, we're just kind of looking after ourselves. It's all just sort of very nice kind of self-care stuff, which I think is great. It's very kind of like inward looking after yourself. But we also, like, there's also a need to have agency and to influence change. And that's also hard, and it requires not always being like the traditionally like nice person. It means communicating about things which might be difficult. It means saying no. It means calling out violence and destruction in the world as well. And when we're doing that, that also really affects our nervous systems too. So I feel like this whole like well-being and power stuff needs to go together, because if you just have like sort of power and leadership without the well-being stuff, but people just get burnt out. You need to look after yourself. But if you just do the well-being, it can just kind of it's fine, but it's just not what I'm about. I'm not just about us just not having nice lives. Do you know what I mean? I'm not just about us having nice lives. There are people out there in the world that don't have nice lives, and I want to go and help them. And that means doing stuff that's really difficult. It means doing things that I don't like all the time. It means doing things that I might be scared about as well. And so then you need this leadership and the power stuff to come in too. I don't know if that's very articulate, but it feels something like the two need to be together.
So somehow it's about taking care of yourself, putting your mask first, and then helping the other person who's seated with you, like on the plane. So helping yourself in order to help other people, right?
Yeah, completely. It's like you need to resource yourself internally. And if you're doing work that's hard, if you're saying no, or you're saying, I think there's a better way, or we can't keep doing it like this, it's going to really impact your nervous system. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to put power in there is because I've worked with a lot of women, and within my ordination training process, there's a lot of like women's only spaces, which I've really benefited from. But women in particular, I think, can really struggle to be visible, to say things that other people might not like, to rock the boat and all of that. But that has a very visceral impact on your body. And so I think this is where burnout can come in, is that we keep kind of putting our heads above the parapet, and we keep stretching ourselves because that's what we feel called to do and want to be responsible citizens and all of that. But our bodies just, we're scared. I think a bit of us is just actually scared that I'm putting myself out there and I'm going to get attacked, I'm going to get challenged, I'm going to get criticised. My very life might, for some people, like their very lives might get threatened from what they're doing. So then people sort of wonder why they're burnt out. It's like, well, of course, like your animal body is scared every single time you speak up about something that it's going to get attacked. And that will have a kind of a long-term impact on you.
Yeah, I would also expect that people working in this field also face their fair share of climate anxiety, which is probably higher among the people who are working in energy/climate field than among, let's say, people who are not aware or interested in anything related to climate. So that's also part of really the narrative or the conversation, trying to preserve yourself, trying to find ways to fight the good fight and be the best version of yourself, because that's what the world needs. And recently I saw on LinkedIn that you developed some kind of characters. Yeah. Could you tell me more about them? And I mean, that's the interesting part of this podcast, is that it's going to be released on the 1st of November, which is also Halloween. So, it's time to play with this kind of characters as well. So can you elaborate a little bit on them and see whether our listeners could identify with them?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I love these, and please you spotted those. So there's lots of different kind of approaches that you can use with coaching and training, and particularly with working with our minds. One of the challenges that we can have is that because it's us and our patterns are so deeply embedded, it can be difficult to create space between who we are sometimes when we're not being so helpful, and who we want to become. And so one of the tools that you can use is personification. You can create characters for that kind of represent a whole set of mindset, communication, and nervous system responses that all get kind of like tied up within this character. And then when you create as a character, it creates like a little bit of space between you and this set of behaviors that you want to kind of look at more clearly and transform. So I do it with all sorts of things. I do it with your people pleaser. I do it with your internal critic. I do it with your external critic. I've got all these like little kind of ways of us personifying these particular habits and ways that we are in the world. And what I've noticed is that when you are in a helping role, so you're trying to do something to benefit the world, people tend to approach it in certain kinds of ways that I think have certain kind of patterns, and that can kind of be like more or less helpful. And so, for example, within like the climate space, I think there's I'll tell you the 5 that I've just come up with. I just spend my time coming up with these things, and there's not just 5. People create these frameworks and they're like, these are the 5 whatnots. It's like, there's probably a lot more than that. It's just a framework that we're using to play with. So it's not a definitive list. But the ones I've created for now are the warrior, the healer, the sage, the magician, and the monarch. Yes, these are different ways of engaging with helping other people on our planet. And yes, the warrior archetype or character, I think, comes out a lot in the climate space at the moment. And it's necessary. Like, we need to kind of like galvanize energy. We need to kind of cut through the kind of delusions that are out there. We need to kind of cut through the apathy and the kind of woolly thinking and all of that. We need a kind of energy that's quite kind of forceful and engaging, and basically gives us a bit of a kick up the arse and says, like, we need to get on and do something. This isn't going well for us. So you need that kind of like warrior-like energy, which is great. You know, and a warrior is also very brave and is willing to sort of stand up for what they believe in, is willing to, you know, sacrifice themselves at times for that. They're willing to, you know, take a few shots, take a few hits as well. Instead of just kind of saying, oh, well, it's someone else's job over there. You know, the kind of warrior is kind of like in there, fighting the fight. But it comes with a set of problems. So warriors also tend to be quite polarized. Yeah, so we can get into these like good, you know, I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy. They can like rush into things. If you're kind of engaging with a climate crisis from a warrior perspective, there's a very good chance that, well, you can't kind of keep that level of energy going all of the time. And I think that's why you see a lot of burnout within the activist space, for example, is because your nervous system to act as a warrior, your nervous system needs to be jacked up all the time, and that will run out after a while. Like, most warriors aren't fighting battles like every single day, 365 days a week. You know, you have a battle, you go and have a rest, have a few days off, then come back.
So it's warriors on batteries, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a kind of particular set of habits. And can you see how there's lots of positives or kind of superpowers of that kind of way of engaging with an issue. And you could apply it to anything, the state of the health sector in the UK, poverty within South London, anything that's going on in Italy. I'm sure we can engage with it as a warrior. So it's got certain benefits, but yeah, it's got these kind of shadow sides as well. And if they're kind of unchecked, or if you're not aware of them, they can actually undermine your own efforts. So, for example, like, it's very easy, we all know, working in the energy space, if you're trying to actually get things done, to get very frustrated with people you might need to partner with, because you're like, why? We just need to get on with this. Why aren't you doing this more quickly? But you can't interact with someone like that all the time. They're not going to want to work with you. You need to cooperate. So that kind of spirit can undermine your efforts in the real world. Whereas the healer is quite a different metaphor, archetype, or impersonal myth to work with. I'm very conflict averse, actually, so I'm probably not the warrior type. A bit of me like is kind of an aspiring warrior, but I'm probably more of a healer archetype. It's very kind of kind, very giving, very much kind of wanting to go out and care for others. You know, there's lots that's very lovely with that. But the healer can also it can absorb too much of the illnesses that they're encountering all the time. And I definitely know this working on the front lines of poverty. You know, there's a lot more interest in vicarious trauma, for example, in the third sector, you know, being exposed to lots of distressing situations every single day. You start absorbing that. So yeah, the healer's very close to the illness. They can kind of absorb it. But also, if you set yourself up as a healer, you always need someone to heal. And so you create this dynamic where you're the helper who needs someone to be helped. And if you're not careful, you can disempower people by kind of making them rely on you.
So it's very egocentric somehow.
Yeah, it can be egocentric. And we've got to be really honest about this. I think it's so important that if you're trying to help, that you don't just try and put yourself on a pedestal. But actually, sometimes people need to be empowered to see that they have the skills and they have the internal and external resources to heal themselves. Whereas if you're just telling them all the time, I'm here to solve all your problems, let me solve all your problems, it doesn't enable them to grow and get confidence in themselves either. So that I would probably say that's probably one of the other weaknesses of the healing type, is that there's a tendency to disempower people instead of giving them the tools and the training that they need to rise up as well.
So the healer can become a vampire?
Oh, yeah, I think actually they can. It's like you can create a kind of codependency. You can create a codependency in the relationship where you get your self-worth from how much you feel like you're saving people. And that can fall apart, I think. You can tell this when, if someone you're trying to help then is suddenly angry with you on the phone, you can just get very self-righteous about it and go, well, I'm trying to, why isn't this person being nice to me? I'm just trying to help. You sort of set yourself up on a pedestal and that, you can fall off.
Well,
but yeah, we don't like to talk about this stuff, do we? Don't we? We like to think, oh, I'm a good person.
Yeah.
I'm a good person. I'm just here to help people, and we can kind of make ourselves a little bit untouchable, but we need to have a lot more humility, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest, really the challenges, because we know that we need more people doing their shares and acknowledging that they have a role to play in addressing the systemic changes that we need, and making sure that the energy transition is just and fair and inclusive, etc. But we also need to get a closer look at ourselves to understand also what our flaws are, to be able to kind of provide, but also by providing people the ways to sustain themselves and for societies to sustain itself, really. So what are the three other profiles? You mentioned the warrior, the healer, and what are the other three?
So I'm remembering which ones. Yeah, so the sage. So quite a lot of people in research, and even some degree have a bit of a research background myself. I feel I've always been sort of quite blended in the work that I've done. And we really need people who are studying and taking a step back from the front lines and getting a bigger perspective, looking for trends and patterns and what's the data showing us, all of that. And I think we're very good at bringing together all of this kind of rich information, qualitative and quantitative research to inform what we do. So we need that. We need people who can step back and be like, what are the facts about the situation to inform where we go? But there's a risk that if you don't have enough connection with stuff really on the ground, that you become very disconnected about what will actually work in practice. And in a way, you're quite protected. So this is where you get criticisms of people just being in ivory towers, that actually, people who are just studying. And it's not necessarily just from if you're in an academic role, there's lots of people who are involved in research and we really need them in different kinds of organizations. But I've definitely seen there can be this kind of disconnect between those roles and people on the ground. And I think we do need to find ways of really valuing what the other side brings more, but also being realistic about just how hard it is to get stuff done. Like, in a way, it doesn't matter if your report shows that something is theoretically possible. It doesn't mean that in my very specific set of conditions, I'm going to be able to implement it. So the sage risks kind of just being disconnected from what will actually work.
That's a very common flaw among policymakers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to diss policymakers because and anyone watching who's a policymaker, I really, really value what you're doing. Thank you, because I can just get too caught up in all the practical stuff. But yeah, and it's just good to know that there can be a certain degree of mistrust. Like, we need to understand how other people in other sectors view us. And even if we don't think that's fair, that impacts how people interact with us and how powerful we can be together. So like, it's just good to know if you're a policymaker, there's other people out there doing very practical stuff that just kind of wonder sometimes what you're doing. We need to just, and I'm just telling you what's going on because we need to be honest about this stuff. We're just like, I don't know, just created a report. I'm not really sure how it impacts me in my role. I'm just trying to help some people who can't feed their kids today, you know? So yeah, we need to find ways of working together a bit better. So that's the sage. And then you've got the magician. The magician.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more.
So we need people who sincerely, not just kind of believe in a wishy-washy way, but like seriously believe that kind of rapid transformative change is possible. Yeah, I think we can get stuck into thinking this is how it's always been, this is how it's always going to be. It's too hard to make change here. It's too difficult to get this done at a local level, whatever it is. You know, people can get into narratives about COP and how effective COP is now and all of that. Yeah, we can just get stuck. So what I love about magicians is they're like, no, like massive change is possible and we can make it happen now. They're very visionary and about kind of rapid change. And to some extent, they're right. You know, you can see in crisis how people really pull together. Like, it was incredible to see what happened on the ground when COVID kicked off in South London and how communities came together to be honest, save each other. Yeah, it was dire in London, like really, really bad. It was basically like doing humanitarian response, humanitarian relief. So major change can happen very quickly. The challenge I think that the magicians have is that, yeah, a bit like the sort of the sage is like, reality is that things are very difficult and you can't just magic something out of a hat continuously. And it's just not, I think some stuff just doesn't work. Yeah. As much as we need this vision of radical change, there's bureaucracy, there's funding challenges, there's people getting ill, you know, there's just life happening. So yeah, and I think magicians can struggle to be patient with other people, and there's a risk of kind of falling into cynicism as well, which is very, very dangerous thing, cynicism. You've really got to protect your mind from it. I was told this once within my Buddhist community years ago. It's like the biggest idealists can become the biggest cynics. You know, you can flop between having this massive vision and hope and then just thinking there's no point, everyone's useless, nothing's going to change and all of that. So they can fall into that. So you've got the magician and then the monarch. And as I said, I'm sure there's lots of other archetypes that people could come up with. So I mean the kind of monarch in a very positive way. I think we can have a very negative relationship with kings and queens and all of that.
Especially in the UK.
Yeah. You can fall either side of the argument on that. But just in terms of like a positive archetype of leadership, we need leaders. Oh my gosh, we need leaders. My Buddhist community very much works on like consensus. We don't have coercion or anything in our decision making and all of that. But we really do need leadership. And we need people, and people are looking for it. People are looking for leadership. They really are people to say, this is the way that we're going to go. This is how we're going to get there together. I'm going to take responsibility for putting my head above the parapet and taking on more risk and all of that. You need people who are willing to do that. But of course, if you put yourself in that role, in a leadership role, it can be very isolated. People can project all sorts of stuff onto you as a leader. I know this. People can have funny ideas about you. Aren't even true, but that's just how they're going to see you. And also, because you have to be so self-reliant as a leader, like you need to be able to self-lead in order to lead other people. You just get used to doing things on your own and thinking that it's going to have to be you up there moving things forward. And so there's a risk of not, kind of empowering other people. Actually, what we want is a lot of monarchs all working together. We want lots of people who are willing to be visible and take on risk and move everyone forward. But yeah, we just need lots of people empowered to do that, not just one or two. And I think it's really important for women as well to really have a look at this kind of archetype. It's very easy, and I certainly had this. Like I'm a very good right-hand woman. Like I really define myself as being excellent in service of other leaders. And then I particularly found within my Buddhist community that women were looking to have more women up front. And I didn't particularly want to do that. Like I used to throw up if I had to do any public speaking. It used to terrify me. I would have never done this. Old version of me would have never done this. She wouldn't have even considered it.
But you're such a natural.
Yeah, exactly. People are like really surprised. Thank you. But this came through training, and it came through me willing to suffer because I believed in the cause. Like I was willing to go through nights where I didn't sleep. I was willing to go through the intense self-criticism. I was willing to go through loving but strong peer feedback. I used to get feedback on my teaching for meditation and things every single week. I was willing to put myself through a lot of discomfort and fear and anxiety because I believed in women stepping up. And because I wasn't just going to be another person saying we need more women leaders, but not being willing to be the person to do that. So I've forged myself.
Yeah, so it's very, very much the warrior archetype that you defined earlier, really. But we are, everybody is a little bit of all of them, isn't it? So now you have defined those archetypes. How would you use them in your coaching? And are you also willing to take on more coaching? Because I think it's also the purpose of this podcast to make your vision and your ability known to more people. So really, how would you use those archetypes to kind of kick off the conversation and make sure that this leadership power and well-being coaching service goes on when you are approaching or you are being approached by a new organization, whatever it is?
So I used to do quite a lot around organizational change. So I work on a very straightforward continuous improvement cycle of assess, vision, plan, act. Assess, vision, plan, act. And if you've done anything on trying to get large organizations to change, you'd have come across something like that. So I just use that. I just use it. I'm very systematic in how I approach behavior change. So yeah, we do that kind of assessment phase of basically like looking at a schema like this and going, okay, well, what behaviors of mine match up? Where are their strengths? And I think it's so important to identify our strengths, but also where are the things that I need to work on because they might be tripping me and other people up. So yeah, we do a whole kind of like assessment phase, really through a kind of like a deep dive questionnaire. And then we have this kind of vision for how you want to show up in the world, particularly based on your core values. And it's so important to imagine ourselves how we want to be and not just get stuck in this like, oh, this is so annoying, I keep doing this thing. So you have it's really, really good kind of...
Yeah, to reach our potential, Yeah,
and have someone reflect things back to you as well, because quite often people don't see their good sides clearly enough. So part of the visioning is for you to do it for yourself, but also to get input from others who know you well.
Yeah, and burnout can also come from this kind of low self-esteem perspective. So it's important to acknowledge this.
Yeah, exactly. So that visioning bit you need to get as objective as possible. And then you just need to make a plan. You just need to be very concrete about what you're going to do. I think the problem with anything that's to do with personal development is it can stay very wishy-washy. You know, it can just stay at the level of like, oh, that's an interesting concept, those 5 myths, but then not really do anything about it. And I'm all about change. I'm really, really all about long-term, sustainable, radical change. So just put a plan together of like, okay, well, what is it that I'm just going to work on next? And it needs to be concrete, like, okay, the next time in a team meeting, instead of doing this, I'm going to do this. Yeah. So it's very much like, can you actually imagine in your mind what it would look like? Not just I just need to be a bit calmer or kinder. Like, what does that actually mean for you? And then which relationships and how are you going to work on that next? What's your next big step? So you've got the planning stage and then acting. And again, this is where people really trip up, because I think a lot of programs and coaches don't work. You need to work with someone quite long term to actually get them to act, because that's where it gets scary and it's hard, because you're actually trying to rewire your brain and become a different person. And it's not just enough for me to give you a nice little presentation for you to then go and be different in a boardroom or in any other situation. So all the work I'm moving towards is much more kind of long-term group programs, long-term one-to-one coaching, so that I can support people through that ACT bit. Because like within my community, like training for ordination it's a big thing. It's a long-term commitment. You get a lot of support, and I've seen the benefits of that. So I want to be able to offer a model where people can engage with me and enable me to support them kind of as long as they need it, really. So that's how I'm kind of designing things at the moment.
Can you share one of your success?
I tell you one of the things that I notice across all of my workshops is kind of comprehensive these frameworks are. The two things that I notice is that, one, people just need something very practical to help them change something. Like it might be as simple as teaching them how to breathe properly. A lot of what I do is just teaching people how to breathe properly when they're in stressful situations. It's as simple as that. And the other thing that's consistent across all of my different types of audience, so like frontline workers in poverty to policymakers to anything else, is that they come along to sessions and they say, I realised I'm not alone. And I find that remarkable that we are working with each other all the time on these massive issues, and yet so many of us feel lonely. And something as simple as coming together and talking about this stuff and sharing experiences and having just something, I think what I do is tiny in a way, you know, I just like drop something in, but the big impact is people coming together and realizing that they're part of a global movement of goodness in the world. And that is so transformative. So I feel like that is probably the biggest win for me at the moment, is seeing that it's the community side of it as much as anything that is transforming people's lives, and just going away and being able to go back to the kind of grind of your daily work, knowing that there's someone out there who gets this as well. It just feels that's really impactful. So yeah, at a kind of collective level, that feels like some of the most significant stuff that's been happening, which doesn't always sound the most sexy, but yeah, I keep seeing it. I keep seeing people write into the chat, I'm not alone. I realize I'm not alone. Like other people experience the same thing.
Yeah, so it's about triggering the conversation one inhalation at a time.
Yeah.
I love it. I try to do it with one podcast at a time, but in any way, it was a very, very lovely way to wrap things up. I mean, Aryanisha, it's so inspirational, the work you do, and it was really a pleasure and a honor to have you in the podcast. So somehow, yes, you define yourself as a person who dreams, but is also very, very practical, and I love that, because we need more dreamers. It's an archetype you didn't really define yet, but we need more dreamers, and we need more builders as well. And you're helping them absolutely. And so thank you so much, Aryanisha. I will put all the references in the show notes of this podcast. And really, I invite our listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn, because you are so incredibly generous with your findings, with your insights. Really, you share them very wisely on LinkedIn, and that's every time you share something, I feel that I'm going to spend a better day. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Would you like to add anything, really, to our listeners now?
I think we just need to keep being honest with ourselves about how we're doing, and we need to keep talking to each other. And it doesn't need to be rocket science. It doesn't need to be anything particularly fancy. We just need to be connecting just a little bit more about why we're doing this work, what sustains us, what we're finding challenging. And that unlocks so much energy and power to keep doing this work. But I think we're just not used to doing it. So yeah, we need to put in the effort to connect with each other based on these visions and what we care about. And there's people out there like me that can help you do that, because I know it's not the normal way that we communicate all the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aryanisha. Have a great day, and see you soon. Thanks for listening to Energetic. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into sustainability and the just energy transition with the most inspiring stakeholders. All links and resources are in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like this podcast, why not recommend it to a friend or a colleague? To continue the conversation, head on over to Twitter or LinkedIn. Thank you for lending your ears. That's all for this episode. Until next time.